Hello, and welcome back to London Cycle Routes. Today, I'll be showing you how to cycle from Hackney Wick in North London to Dalston. This ride takes about 20 minutes, and you can do the whole thing on quiet streets and protected cycle lanes. By public transport, the same journey also takes around 20 minutes, so cycling is a great way to make this trip. If you find this video useful or you just enjoy watching it, then please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as I try to post new videos just like it every week. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel on Patreon. If you'd like to contribute too, then you can find a link in the description below the video. Alright, let's get going. So we're starting under the railway bridge by Hackney Wick station and we're going to head down Wallace Road. Hackney Wick is cut off from the rest of Hackney by the East Cross route, a massive dual carriageway which you might also know as the A12. This is kind of unfortunate, although it does give the area a little bit of an island feeling, which I guess is part of its charm. Fortunately, there is a walking and cycling bridge over the A12 which we can use here. It has ramps which you have to cycle up, and you cycle on one side of the path with people walking on the other side. Unlike Hackney Wick's other walking and cycling bridge over the River Lee to its eastern boundary, this one has accessible ramps on both sides, so you shouldn't need to dismount, and there's no chance of the elevators being out of service as there are no elevators on it. For the next part of this route, we're going to cut through Victoria Park. You are allowed to cycle on the paths here, you can see the little cycle symbol, but do remember that pedestrians have priority on them, so make sure you give plenty of space and don't ride too quickly. The paths are in the main really wide and really almost resemble roads in most places though, so you shouldn't really have any problems except on the very busiest of days. Victoria Park does close at night, so if you need to do this route after dark, you can just go around the park on Cadogan Terrace, which we crossed to get in here, and then left onto Victoria Park Road, which you can see at the far end there by those houses, with a few cars running along it. The park has a really interesting history. It was opened in 1845, but it was decided to be constructed after a mass petition to Queen Victoria after a recommendation by the epidemiologist William Farr. Now, given we've all just lived through a pandemic, I suspect you probably know what an epidemiologist is, and yeah, it's someone who studies diseases. Farr had argued that the cramped conditions in the East End were partly responsible for high rates of disease, and the building of a nice park here would save lives to the tune of several thousand people a year, and also reduce expenditure on what were then known as poor rates, or essentially social security. As well as the cramped conditions, one of the health issues in this area of London at the time was the access to clean drinking water, and the park also played a role there. If you keep an eye on the horizon to our left in a moment, you will see a pointed, ornate Gothic building that looks a little bit like a tower. It's just coming up visible through the trees here. This is actually a drinking fountain, and it was the first clean, free water source in the area. The building was donated by Baroness Angela Burdett Coutts, a famous philanthropist at the time, whose name you might recognise from Burdett Road in Mile End, which is also named after her. The unusual democratic genesis of Victoria Park led to it being nicknamed the People's Park, a name which is still memorialised in the People's Park Tavern, which was on our right a few moments back and is still to this day a nice pub worth a visit. There are plenty of other pubs around here, not least the Royal Inn on the park to our right there, which is our queue to leave. We briefly pull out onto Grove Road and then turn left into Gore Road. If you were looking carefully as we entered Gore Road, you might have seen those no motor vehicles signs at the entrance to the street. That's because Gore Road was closed to through traffic by Hackney Council back in 2020, and ever since it's been nice and quiet and a very pleasant place to ride a bike. You could continue in the park itself if you wanted, but this road is now just as good. And crucially, it doesn't shut at night, so if you were using the diversion for after dark, then you can pick up the route here. The streets around the edge of the park, like Gore Road, were laid out at the same time as the park by the Crown Commissioners, but the buildings weren't really constructed until a bit later, with most popping up in the 1870s. Just a reminder that if you need a bit of extra help navigating this route, you can always download the map, which is linked in the description below the video. It's on a website called Komoot, and you can download it in a GPX format and use it on whatever app or device you prefer. As we leave the park area, you'll want to go briefly on Victoria Park Road and use this very small section of cycle track to get you over to Claremont Road. This street and the others around it are reasonably quiet, in part due to the fact that it is closed at one end. Unfortunately, there is not a dropped curb for getting onto the closure, or at least not one directly in the middle of the closure, so what you'll want to do is bear slightly to the left and use the drop here, then bear back into the right. It would definitely be better to have a proper dropped curb in the centre of the street for bikes to use that closure more easily, just as there is on the other side, although you couldn't see it in this case as there was a lorry doing some works there obstructing it. Likewise, the fire gate here on Tudor Road is keeping this street nice and quiet and making sure that there's no through traffic on it, and on a bike you'll need to go to the side of it. There's a slightly trickier bit coming up here. We need to get across Mare Street, which is a busy road in the centre of Hackney. There is a little trick to it. There's a small protective strip of greenery just there, which you can use to shield yourself from oncoming traffic and cross those lanes one at a time. It would probably be better though if that strip were slightly built out to the junction of Tudor Road, just to make it a little bit more comfortable. There's a similar arrangement on Mare Street actually further down at the junction with London Lane, which we've used in other videos on this channel. Next we get to London Fields, so named because they are the fields on the London side of Hackney, and you're allowed to cycle on the paths here, but do remember that they're shared with pedestrians, and the ones that we're using today are a little bit on the narrow side, so just be courteous as you go down them. Fortunately, it's quite easy to find your way as you just go straight on until you get onto Westgate Street, and then you can pass through the bus gate at Lansdowne Drive, which was recently made 7 days a week, 7 AM till 7 PM, which has the effect of making Lansdowne Drive a really nice place to cycle before it could sometimes get rat run traffic, especially when the market was on. We continue a short way up Lansdowne Drive before turning left into Middleton Road. Middleton Road is again really nice and quiet, and it's a popular cycle route thanks to its inclusion in the London Fields low traffic neighbourhood, which closes off streets to through traffic. Probably the biggest downside of this street though is the surface, which is really pockmarked and cratered like the surface of the moon, so if you're like me and you're on a road bike, do expect it to vibrate a little bit. If it wasn't for that issue with the surface, it would really be a pretty perfect cycleway. The traffic levels are always incredibly low, and there's always loads of people using it to go east-west from London Fields and Hackney in general over towards Dalston and beyond. One nice touch on this route is the cycle level signals like the one that you see on there, so you don't have to crane your head and look up at the traffic lights when you're waiting. You just get an extra bike light right in front of you there. They're not exactly revolutionary, but they are the type of change which I think has become incredibly common in London in the last 10 years or so, but which before the last 10 years were pretty much unheard of, and I suspect there are still parts of the country where they're really uncommon. Some of those cycle level signals have what's called a head start for cyclists, so that bikes waiting at the front of the traffic lane can get a head start in front of the rest of the traffic, and some of them are just on the same time as the rest of the lights. I know that people from around the country and around the world watch this channel just out of interest. I'd be interested to hear from you guys whether those kind of traffic lights are common in your town or city, please do let me know in the comments. The reason I ask is often people ask me about stuff that I thought was common across the country now. For example, on-street residential cycle storage or cycle hangers are a really common sight in London. And I thought they were elsewhere too, but people were asking me what they were, and we cycle past them all the time and I wasn't commenting on them. So yeah, I'm just interested to get a feel for that. But yeah, we're basically here now. That's Dalston Lane up ahead, and Kingsland High Street is just to the left of us. Dalston Junction Station is also on the left here, just on this pavement. And if you need to get to Dalston Kingsland, it's just up on our right here at the next junction. I'm not cycling here, I've just got off my bike and I'm walking down the pavement just to show you the middle. You can see the overground station sign just at the end of the street there, past those flats. So yeah, we're very much in the middle of Dalston. Dalston and Hackney Wick are of course not particularly far apart. They're in the same borough, they're both in Hackney, and they're pretty well connected by public transport as well. You can see the rail line there takes a pretty direct route. But despite that, of course, I think it can be tricky to work out how to cycle between these two places, especially without using the main roads. You can see there that the East Cross route, Wick Road, Morning Lane, Graham Road kind of go there, but they're not particularly direct, and you wouldn't necessarily want to cycle on them, especially on the East Cross route, which is not so nice. And the East Cross route obviously creates a bit of a barrier between Hackney Wick and elsewhere, so there are only certain places where you can cross it. So hopefully this route will be useful for people making that trip. So thank you very much for watching and staying till the end of the video. Really appreciate it. Thanks once again to everyone who supports the channel on the Patreon. If anyone else is interested in throwing money at me, you can do so in the link below the video and help support the channel. If you're not already subscribed, do make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon as well so that you're alerted to new videos as they launch. And please do let me know in the comments what you think of that. Maybe if you make this route regularly and you take a different way. But general comments, suggestions and other feedback are really appreciated. I will see some of you in the comments, and the rest of you I'll see next week. Goodbye.